On the 25th of November 2011, 36-year-old South African Stephen McGowan was kidnapped by Al-Qaeda terrorists in Timbuktu. Newly married, Stephen was motorbiking from London back home to Johannesburg. Abducted, he was held hostage in the deserts of Mali for 6 years.
My plan was not to be a hero ever. What I told my family was that if I ever encounter problems, I will just leave everything and leave. In essence, we had just been for a walk around Timbuktu, myself and some other tourists. I was sitting with my phone, typing up a bit of a diary. It was during the Friday prayer, so the streets were empty. They walked in, 3 guys, and basically took us out one by one into the street, cuffed us, loaded us up in the back of a 4x4. They pulled a cargo net over us, so we were unable to move, and then we zoomed out into the desert.
I was sitting in my office on a Saturday morning, and I get this phone call at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it's from the lady in Holland that he was riding with her son. And when she introduced herself, I said, "Don't tell me this is bad news." She said, "I'm afraid so." That's the first we heard. It was a shattering news, as you can imagine.
Some 18 months later, in May 2013, Pierre and Yolande Korkie were abducted by Al-Qaeda terrorists in Yemen. At the time, they had been resident with their 2 young children in the southern town of Imtiaz for some 4 years. Pierre taught English, and Yolande ran grassroots projects in the local community. Then came war. As the situation deteriorated, the Korkies found themselves trapped, waiting for their passports to be renewed by the Yemen authorities.
With a lot of help and support from our Yemeni friends, we've managed to finally get our passports extracted from the government system. And we were actually, that afternoon, we just left the house to go and collect the passports with the exit visas. And Lisa Marie, our daughter, was 14 at the time. She was going to come with us, but she stayed behind with our son. Pierre was a very hands-on father. There were always hugs and kisses being exchanged, so those were part of the last few moments. And we left the house, and that was the last time Pierre saw, held, spoke, knew anything about his children.
That first morning, I phoned all over, every number in Pretoria from the government side. I know governments don't pay, but whatever the ransom figure was, I want my son home. And I think I said to every minister I met, "Have you got children? Put yourself in my shoes. What would you do if your son or daughter, whatever, was taken?" So I was doing what any father would do.
When my car door, I was a passenger, was yanked open, I think the realization that something was going wrong hit us. I was dragged across the road. I looked back. Pierre had a gun to his head, and within the next few seconds, Pierre was also yanked out of the car and brought, and we were bundled into the car. There were guys all over the place. The car was full to capacity, and we went off. We were being kidnapped, but our attention turned to our children and what were they going through? Would they be safe? Would they harm them? What would they do with them? You're incarcerated, so your humaneness is, you're stripped of your humaneness, and you start to go into introspection, worry about the children, and we had no contact. We tried desperately several times. Every day, if we could, we tried to initiate a conversation to get contact with him, but we were not allowed. It wasn't allowed. But mostly Pierre, I cannot imagine if I would have made it without him being there. He managed to keep us to a sort of a routine when we could. We tried to just divide our day. Now you're living without a clock, so you've got to try and manage the time. Sometimes you wouldn't know whether it was day or night, depending on where they kept you. Just to keep going, you know, spend time in prayer, talking, singing, rubbing each other's backs, going back to the same routine.
By 2013, through their ongoing relief campaign, Gift of the Givers had established a significant profile in Yemen. Becoming aware of the Korkie's abduction, Dr. Sooliman and Anas Hamatin, Gift's representative in Yemen, decided to escalate the campaign, thereby raising their profile and building further goodwill.
Our advantage is we have a profile in Yemen. People know who we are. What we can do is we'll send more supplies, more goods, and I started increasing the amount of stuff we started sending into Yemen to build goodwill with everybody. And we said, hopefully, maybe it'll soften somebody's heart and say, look, South Africans are helping us, why we took a South African?
Pierre was very, very sick at that time. He woke up one morning and he could not hear anything. He was completely 100% deaf. It was very traumatic time for us. And then the Sheikh came and said we were going to be released. On the night of the 9th, they woke us up in the middle of the night somewhere. They pulled us out of the room next door into their side, and they pushed down Pierre on the floor, and they said I was going first, and I said no, well, there's a mistake, we're going together. The Sheikh had said we're going together. Pierre jumped up, he couldn't hear, he was trying to ask what's going on. It was a confusing, horrendous few seconds. We were holding each other, trying to make sense of what was going on, and they tried to calm us down, but then they separated us forcefully. And the last thing Pierre said was, if you see the children before I see them, tell them I love them and I love you. And whew, even though I was released, I was still a hostage. My heart had stayed behind almost in Yemen, so I was sort of living on 2 continents, and lots of things went wrong. It was a horrendous, tumultuous 11 months that followed, and that's the one thing I have so much appreciation for Imtiaz and for Anas, is they were 100% accessible. They were not at all fazed if I wanted to talk at 2 in the morning. They were available to hear my fears. They were available to give me, to encourage the children and myself. They kept having hope, and they kept trying to find a channel or a way to continue with negotiations for Pierre.
It took us a long time. We had to use tribal leaders who met tribal leaders, and over the period of time, the tribal leaders eventually, on our behalf, sort of pressurized Al-Qaeda to say, look, you're passing all our lands all the time. I kept on sending in more supplies. The South Africans have brought in so much goods, this one we have to look the other way. So at 5:59 on the morning of 6 December 2014, I tell Yolande a message. I said, Yolande, the wait is finally over. He is coming back home.
I got ready, got dressed, washed my hair. Maybe today was the day that I would be able to fly and be reunited with Pierre. And then I got a call from Colonel Aaron Stradom, with the FBI on the other side as well, stating that the Americans had gone in to launch a second rescue operation for the American hostage Luke Summers, and they were discovered before they had executed the complete rescue operation, apparently, and out of revenge the captors then went in and killed Pierre and Luke.
That was the most difficult thing, for me to eventually tell Yolande, but she was gracious. She said, look, I'm not blaming anybody. I forgive everybody. Nothing will bring Pierre back. You can't have hate. You can't have anger. It's not going to bring Pierre Korkie back. And she said Pierre Korkie was the kind of guy who would say, you know what, forget everything, forgive everybody, let things lie and go forward. So I have to be what Pierre would want me to be. And that's what I'm going to be now. And that's how it ended.
Feeling totally abandoned, held hostage for almost 4 years, in June 2015, Stephen McGowan, under the instruction and supervision of his Al-Qaeda captors, made a proof-of-life video which was posted on social media.
June 2015, for some strange reason, the TV was on in my house in the morning. And suddenly I see this video of Stephen McGowan. It's like God put the TV on for me. And I said, this is Stephen McGowan. And he's showing the pictures, and the way the video is talking, I said to me, these guys want to negotiate. I phoned Malcolm. I said, Malcolm, I'm taking this case up for you. These guys want to talk. This video is telling me that very, very clearly. We'll work the mechanics out afterwards. But yes, I'm going to help you now. Because these guys want to talk. Let's not lose the opportunity.
I heard about Gift of the Givers in, I think it was around October in 2014. Some guys drove into our camp and they said to me, there is a South African Muslim organization who are now going to negotiate your release. And then they turned to the Swedish guy and said, and they're going to negotiate yours as well.
And this process took over 2 years. I involved the South African government. The South African government involved the Swedish government. We told them the channels, what to do, how it has to be done. We got all information for them. Eventually, Al-Qaeda sent a message. You've done your job. You've got your government to speak to the Mali government. You've got your government to speak to state security. You spoke to our intermediary. Again, all that message is coming to the intermediary. We sent you the videos. They are both alive. Now, you have to pull back. Beyond this point, you as an NGO cannot go.
In July 2017, after 6 years of captivity in the desert wilderness of Mali, Stephen McGowan was released by his Al-Qaeda captors and arrived back home in Johannesburg, South Africa.
It's the biggest surprise day of my life. I looked out and there's this big Land Rover with 2 big guys in it, and I opened up, let them in, and they said no, they've got no news. My heart sunk. They said they're waiting for a phone call. And eventually I said to them, I said, if Stephen is coming back, I just want, please, that you tell, I don't want him to arrive off the plane, to give Kath a hug, to give me a hug, and then say, where's Mom? I said they must disclose to him that his mother's passed away.
Yeah, I had many questions the previous evening asking what I was going home to. Did I have a wife? Did I have a family?
And, well, you can imagine. So, another 2, I think, Land Rovers arrived with this big black Mercedes. And out jumped Steve, fully clothed, as he lived in the desert.
And my father was the first guy I saw. He walked out, gave me a big hug. There was lots of tears and, quite like an emotional overload, if you like. Obviously, my mom passed away. There were certain topics we didn't discuss at the time, but it was, I suppose, 6 years of questions and emotion squeezed into a moment, a 10-second moment when I saw my father. It was quite overwhelming.
I felt fantastic on the one hand, but very sad on the other. We were a month too late for him to see his mother. We didn't succeed in getting him out for his mother to see him or for him to see his mother. That was the very sad part for us.